Music theory with OneNote. Modal distance names versus scale degree interval names, looking at the major modes, that being the Ionian mode, otherwise known as the major scale, the Lydian mode, and the Mixolydian mode. Get ready and some coffee, because although we're playing with just one note, it's a beautiful note. Not required to, but if you have access to it and would like to follow along, we're currently in the OneNote file of Modal Node System, MNS Presentation 1214, OneNote Modal Distance Names versus Scale Degree Interval Names, Major Modes. The list is over here of the presentations. We plan on adding plenty more to them shortly, however. Also noting that in this OneNote presentation, we can spend all of our time talking about music theory, but we also have another presentation similarly numbered and named where we actually build these tables in Excel, practicing both our Excel skills and music skills, noting that even on just the music skills side of things, visualizing tables is useful. Best way to be able to visualize tables is to build tables. Last time we talked about the intervals. We're going to continue with the concept of intervals. Let's go over the general visualization that we want to have in mind, remembering that we have terminology that is not perfect. And that means that we want to make sure that we can take what we need from the terminology to serve the purpose primarily of navigating our instrument. In our case, I'm going to say that is the guitar. Best way to visualize the guitar as a map of the territory, like the globe, having 7 continent locations and 5 non-continent ocean locations that we go through to get to the continent locations. Our head is above the fretboard, this being the low or heavy E string, the one closest to the ceiling on the fretboard. Our head would be up here in space, looking at the fretboard, for which we give 12 degrees of rotation, imagining it is rotating like the planet. Those 12 degrees of rotation are the notes in the musical alphabet. We're typically going to be working in note 4, otherwise known as C. But if we were to move up to C sharp, to D sharp, and so on, this whole thing would just shift forward, just like the continents would shift forward. Therefore, once we have the degree of visualization, we want to not name these places by the note names, but rather by the continent name equivalent, which in the Nashville number system would be the Nashville numbers 1 through 7, permanent number system, absolute number system, which is in essence just replacing the mode names with a number. So number 1 is Ionian, number 3 is Phrygian, number 2 is Dorian, number 6 is Aeolian, and so on and so forth. So the problem with this system, with our normal naming conventions for distance, is that the distance naming convention is going to try to force us to change the name of the continents because of the use of scale degrees, which were caused by starting at 1 instead of 0 when you measure stuff, which has been it's rippling through the whole system, causing all kind of problems. We want to be able to recognize that so that we can then just take the names that we need and not let them force us into visualizing the fretboard in ways that are inaccurate and or inefficient. So we can also think of our continents as a circle here. That would be the easiest way to kind of visualize it. And it's even easier than a map of like Zelda if you're playing a video game or something, because all of the locations are in a circle. It's like going around a block. So they're all in order. All the locations are in order. Right? So that makes it easy. Like if I'm on this 3 over here, if I'm on the Africa 3 over here and I'm trying to get to the 6, then I can only go one way. It's not like there's no long route or short route. I could go the long route, which is backwards. We'll talk about that later. But I can't go like across the middle or something like that, right? I have to go around the block. So it's going to be 1, 2, 3 continents over, which in our case, we're going to say is the equivalent of modal half steps, a new term, which is the corrected term for what we currently use, which is scale degrees, forcing the continent name of Africa 3 to be like Asia 1. We have to rename it, which is what we don't want to do. But if we did that, if we made that a 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, scale degrees are off by 1 because they forgot how to measure stuff when they came up with this stuff, all right? So we're going to fix that and recognize the scale degrees are just off by 1. But if we count the oceans, we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's equivalent to the notes. That's going to be our general naming convention we have to and want to keep in our mind. Now we have then our 12 notes in the musical alphabet over here. We selected 7 of them. We're going to be working in the collection of notes based on the major scale. Now note that all of the relationships are like copying and pasting in Excel. All the relative positions change. So that means that this works all the way across all of the 12 different sets of 7 notes that we typically use. Those are all the colors that we have, all the crayon boxes that we can pull from that all have the same colors in them that kind of go together to make a picture that doesn't all clash. So, right? And we're going, in this case, we typically look at these collections of notes as though they are 7 distinct scales. That's not the optimal way to do it, but that's the way that the terms are based on. We're now going to move to the terminology, which I think is more intuitive. This is what I think would come up if we were to create the terms from scratch. And I would recommend, if not learning them outright, you at least recognize the parts of them that work and then try to be able to visualize the current system in such a way that it's optimal for you to understand exactly what you want, distance from this information. All right. So we had our 7 notes. We said there's 11 different intervals, like a ruler, and you have all the different sets of inches in the ruler, right? I can go from, if I'm on this C, I can go up 1 step, or I can go up 2 steps, or I can go up 3 steps, or I can go up 4 steps, all the way up to going up 11 steps. And those are all the different kind of steps that we can take. We gave names to those, or they gave names to those. Someone gave names to those at some point, but they named them based on the major scale. So these are the collection of notes, remembering that if it says it's a major or perfect, then it is an interval that is in the major scale, meaning if you go up that distance, it won't land you in the ocean. You will land on another continent. That's how you want to basically think about it, right? But they don't give you the actual notes. So I recommend that you at least add the notes as you say these intervals, because that's going to tell you the actual important thing about the interval, the distance in the term of notes. Now, if it wasn't in the major scale, in other words, if it did land you in the ocean, if you were starting from the Ionian or major scale, the 1 of the major scale, then we usually flattened it, calling it a minor, which would make you think that it would be in the minor scale or in the minor modes, but it is not always in the minor modes. It's just the result of us making everything off the major scale. And if that didn't fit because of this perfect thing, we ended up with a diminished thing here. It's a mess. So I would recommend, however, to instead of using this third over here, or at least remember the third actually means it's a distance in our collection of notes, which is always in order, which is off by 1 because they started on that note. It should be from that note. So all of these second numbers are too high by 1. So if someone says it's a 4-note away major third, you can think in your mind it's a 4-note away major, and the major is not even necessary. It's a 4-note away a second modal half step, which is a 3rd scale degree. So if you're going to actually count it, I don't need to make this the 1. I can count it from here, right? And I can keep that as the 5 and say it's 2 notes away. It's a 4-note away second modal half step. I don't need to make that a scale, which wouldn't even be a major scale. It would be a Mixolydian scale if I made that the 1 with the same 7 collection of notes. All right, so let's go through this again and now look at it from the perspective of the Ionian in what I would think is the preferable method. Now, remember, the idea here is that you're on a map. We have these 7 locations on the map plus the oceans, right? But the map is even easier because, again, it's going around a block. All you can do is go around a block. So one way we can visualize this is just by telling what the 2 endpoints on the map are. So if I say I'm on the Ionian, which you can also call the 1, if you're in a Nashville number system, naming them 1 through 7, you can call it a 1-1 distance or an I distance. What does that mean? I didn't move anywhere. I went from the I to the I. I stayed on the same location. I'm calling that a modal range, right? You just name the two endpoints. That's like directions. Where are you going? I'm going from home. If you're going on MapQuest or on Google Maps and trying to get a map, well, you need 2 points. I'm going from home to school or home to work. That's what's happening here. We're going from Ionian to Ionian, 1 to 1 from a Nashville number system. What's the distance if I go from Ionian to Ionian? Well, I would think the best way to say it is, well, it's 0 steps away, 0 notes away from the Ionian node, which is the 0th modal half step, which would be the first scale degree. See, so this 0 perfect first is basically equivalent to the 0 Ionian 0th step away, because we haven't moved anywhere. So this actually, all the terms kind of make more sense. Let's do the next one, which is a little bit, actually, let's do the ones that are in the key, and then we'll go back to the ones in the middle again. So what if I go to an ID? So now I'm going from I to D, right? The two locations on the map is an ID location. If you put it into MapQuest, we're going from I to D. Now note, there are actually 2 ways that we can do that. If I'm on the 1 to the 2, I can take 1 step forward, or I can take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 step backwards, because we have a block situation on the map. I can go around the block clockwise or go around the block counterclockwise. Right now, we're just going clockwise. We'll talk about counterclockwise later. So that means it's always in order. The ID distance, MapQuest, is always the same. The distance is just going clockwise. Now, again, we could add more complexity going around the block in octaves. We'll talk about that later. But even then, we can think of it as a clock face, and therefore the distance is always the same. So it's quite useful to think of it as a map, literally, and say you're going from the Ionian to Dorian, which from a Nashville number system would be going from the 1 to the 2. That's the numbers for the Ionian and the Dorian. So what would be the distance? It would be a 2 node away from the Ionian node, which is the major scale node, first modal half step, which means it would be the second scale degree, as we can see here. It'd be equivalent to a two node away major second, right? I would call that a 2 node away from the Ionian node, and it would be a first modal half step, which would be the second scale degree. So in other words, if I was on the Ionian node and I went 2 notes away, 1, 2, I get to the D here, which is the Dorian node. If I'm on the Ionian node here, out of the 7 collection of notes, I go up 1 modal half step to get to the Dorian, which would be, if I messed up and counted this as the 1 in my measurement, it would be the second scale degree. So this is the normal way. Let's go to the next one that's in the key. We go to an IP. So now I'm going from I, and I'm going around in a circle to the location P, or 1, the first to the third from a Nashville number system. The distance is always the same. If we're going clockwise, we can replace the I and the P with a 1-3, so I would call it an IP modal range or a 1-3 modal range. What's going to be the distance? It's a 4 node away, because if I start on an I go 1, 2, 3, 4 to get to the P, 4 node away from the Ionian node, which is the second modal half step, meaning if I measure properly distance-wise 1, 2, the second modal half step up, which means it would be the third scale degree if I measured incorrectly, making that the 1 instead of the 0, 1, 2, 3. So that's going to be the 4 Ionian second modal half step would be equivalent to the 4 node away major third, right? So again, that major doesn't really tell you anything. The 4 is the thing that should tell you. It's a 4 third scale degree, which means it would be the second modal half step. The 4 is the thing that tells you the distance, and you know that that's going to be in the major scale, right? That's the way you want to see it, because the major shouldn't be the thing that's telling you the information. I want the 4, the distance, to tell me the information, because that's the important thing, right? And so then if I go to the next one, we go to an IY. So that means I'm going from the Ionian to up 1, 2, 3 to the Lydian, or it would be a 1-4. So it would be an IY modal range or an I4 modal range. Now note on these, the names, you might have a question of why I came up with these letters. The Ionian is an I. That makes sense. Dorian's a D. Phrygian's a P. Lydian, I put a Y because the L looks like a 1 sometimes. So I think the Y is actually better for Lydian. Mixolydian, the M looks like a major or minor. So I'd rather not use that. So I'm going to use an X. An Aeolian, a small A, I think works, even though it kind of get mixed up with an A letter of the note name. And then the N, again, is Locrian that has an L, which would be a small L. And I would rather put it as something else. And I'm going to put an N because the Locrian's the crazy one. So to me, it makes sense that it would be backwards, right? So that's where I have an N. It's backwards because it's crazy. All right. So then we have the IY. So what's going to be the distance? It's a 5 note away from the Ionian node third. So if I'm on Ionian, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 gets me to the Lydian. 5 notes away from the Ionian, lands me on a continent, and it's the third modal half step, which would be the 4th scale degree. In other words, 1, 2, if I'm here, 1, 2, 3 up gets me to the 4th or to the Lydian. And if I made that the 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, it would be the 4th scale degree. All right, let's go to the next one that's in that lands us on a continent. It would be an IX. So if I go 1, 2, 3, 4 up, we get to the X. That would be a modal range. The 2 locations, I start on the I go to the X. We can replace those with the numbers. It would be a 1, 5 modal range. What's the distance of a 1, 5 modal range? If I'm going from location I to location X, well, it's 7 notes away from the Ionian node, and it's a 4th modal half step, which would be the 5th scale degree. In other words, if I'm on the I go up 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 notes gets me to the X or Mixolydian location. If I just look at the 7 notes from I, 1, 2, 3, 4, it's 4 modal half steps up, which means it's the 5th if I make that the 1 scale degree. Okay, so then if I go the next one, so that 7 note away I 4th is a 5th scale degree, right? So it's a 7 note away perfect 5th. So again, the perfect shouldn't be the thing that tells you, it's the quality. The quality should be known by the distance. The 7 note away 5th scale degree or 4th modal half step. The perfect, I would recommend that you kind of remove that as the trigger factor to tell you the importance of the interval. It's the distance that should tell you the importance of the interval. All right, and then let's go to the next one. We're going to go to an IA. So an IA should go from here to here. So we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 modal half steps up. And so it's an IA modal range or a 1/6 modal range. What's the distance if I go from the Ionian continent to the Aeolian continent? It's always the same, even if it's not in this collection of notes. If I took the collection of notes of D sharp, then the distance from the Ionian continent to the Aeolian will be the same. That's the point. So I want to memorize all of these distances. I know that's tedious, but that's easier to do than try to memorize all the notes that are going to change relative to all the different scales, which is what a lot of people do. I mean, it's crazy. So this is a 9 note away from the Ionian node, 5th modal half step, which would be the 6th scale degree. So if I'm on the Ionian going up 9, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 gets me to the Aeolian node. And it's if I go on the Ionian and I go up 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 gets me to the Aeolian 5th modal half step, which would be the 6th scale degree if I make this the 1, making that measurement error. All right, so then if I go down to the last one here, let's just do the last one. Let me undo that because I'm gonna use this later. So now we've got a oh no, now it's okay. I'll deal with that in a second. So now we've got the last one, which is a IN. So if I go from the location I to the N, that's the modal range. I'm going from the Ionian continent to the Locrian continent, which we can give the number of a 1, 7. What's the distance? It's 11 notes away. If I'm on the C, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 gets me to the N, the Locrian. Or if I just look at the collection of notes and I'm on the I, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 modal half steps up, which would be the 7th scale degree if I made that the 1. So an 11 note away I 6th modal half step is equivalent to an 11 note away major 7th scale degree, right? The major shouldn't tell you anything. It's the 11 note away 7th scale degree that should be telling you what is happening. And okay, so hopefully now let's go to the ones in the middle. What about the ones in the middle? Can I do the ones in the middle? Yeah, we can go to the ones in the middle. So now we're going to say the ones that land us in the ocean, if we're in the major scale, are going to be, we're going to say, all right, we could go to an II. I'm going to call it an II plus because it's in the middle. Now remember, they don't do that over here, right? On the majors, we say it's either a major or a minor. So they still call it a second. Even though it's not a second with relation to the major scale, it lands you in the ocean, right? If I go one note away, it lands you in the ocean. It's a 1.5 for the major scale. So they kind of just still call it a second because it could be a second in some other scale, right? They just basically keep the same second, but that's not exactly right. You would think it would be the II, I'm going to call plus. Why is there a plus? Because it's the one right after the I. So you could call it an II plus or an ID minus. In other words, if I go one step, it's going to land me in the ocean between the Ionian and the Dorian because I need to go 2 steps to get up to the Dorian. So we could call that a 1.5 modal range or an II plus modal range. I'm going to call it. The distance is going to be a 1 node away from the Ionian node, and it's going to be a 0.5 modal half step. Now, so which would be equivalent, you would think, to a 1.5 scale degree, but they don't do. But again, the scale degrees don't use 0.5s, right? So that would round up to a 2 scale degree. So that's going to be so anything that has a 0.5 then is going to land you in the ocean. But this is going to actually tell you by looking at it, because I'm comparing to the Ionian mode, that it's going to land you in the ocean, right? So if I go up 1 note, it's going to land me in the ocean. If I'm on the Ionian, I'm going up 0.5, which is impossible. It lands me in between the Ionian and the Dorian. That's the point. All right, let's go to the next one that's in the middle. So we have an ID. So the one right after the ID. So if I go from I to D, I'm going to call it an ID plus, meaning it's an ID 0.5 or an IP minus 0.5. And that's because if I go right after the D, there's a note in the middle. So it's a D 0.5. It's going to land me in the ocean once again. So I'm going to call it an ID plus, or an I is a 1 to the 2.5 modal half step, which you would think would be a 3.5 scale degree. But even though it's not in the major scale, they call it a third, right? A 3.5 is going to round up to a third, basically, is going to be the general take on that. But over here, it's more clear because it tells you by the fact that it's a 0.5 that it's in between. It's in the ocean, right? And so you have a 3 node away Ionian 1.5. If I start here and I go up 3, 1, 2, 3, lands me in the ocean. Let's go to the next one. We're going to say next one that lands me in the ocean is an IY plus. So we're going to go from the I, 1, 2, 3, and then right after the Y and in between the Y and the X. So it's an IY plus landing us in the ocean. We're fishing. We're out there fishing in the ocean. It's a 1 to a 4.5 modal range, which is a 6 node away from the Ionian node, which is a 3.5 modal half step, which you would think would be a 4.5 scale degree, but it's going to round up to 5 the way the normal naming convention is, because they don't do the 0.5, even though it's based on the major scale, and it would be in between, right? So it's going to be a 6 node away diminished. In this case, this is the weird one, 5th, because the 7th, we talked about that before, but that's going to be the idea. Usually the minor is going to be 1 step down from the major, which is everything's built on, but this was a perfect, so there wasn't a step down, so they had to call it diminished, and that's going to be the idea. So if I count it up, it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, lands me in the ocean, and 3.5 up is going to be 1, 2, 3.5. So we are between the y and the x. You would think it would be 4.5 if I make that the 1 scale degrees. That's what the proper scale degree would be, but they don't use 0.5s. They still call it a fifth, and they say it's a flat fifth, meaning it's not in the major scale. But I want to know whether or not it's in, well, we'll talk about that later. So then we got the next one that's in the middle, an IX plus. So we're going from the IX plus, we're going I to the place right after the X. So I'm in between X and A. I'm going to call that an IX plus modal range. And the next one up is going to be here, or I'm going to call it a 5.5 modal range. It's going to be an 8 node away from the Ionian node 4.5 modal half step, which you would think would be 5.5 scale degree, but they rounded up to a 6 scale degree, right? So if I go 9 from the Ionian, we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Wait a sec. We go 8 from the Aeolian. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. From 8 from the Ionian. Lands me in the ocean just before the Aeolian continent. And if I count it up here, we're going to say it's 4.5, 1, 2, 3, 4. 4.5 is right in between here, which you would think it would be called 5.5 scale degree right in between here. But they don't do that. They just round it up to a 6, and they just call it a minor 6. That's the one that's in the middle. That's the one that lands you in the ocean if you're in a major scale. All right, and then this one is going to be an IA plus modal range, or a 6.5 modal range. So we're going from the Ionian continent to the ocean right after the Aeolian continent, landing us in between Aeolian and the Locrian. So that's going to be a 10 node away Ionian 5.5 modal half step, which you would think would be a 6.5 modal range, which rounds up to 7 because they don't use the 0.5. So if I go up 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, lands me in the ocean. If I go up 5.5 from here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.5, lands me between the Aeolian and the Locrian. And if I used scale degrees, you would think it would be 6.5. But no, they round it up to 7, and they just say it's a minor 7, because that's kind of like the 0.5 term, right? All right, now let's do another one. Now let's say we're going to go to the Lydian. So notice I have my collection of notes, 7 notes, but now I'm going to be looking and measuring from the Lydian. Now, under normal context, what do? They say, I need to make the Lydian the 1, and then we measure from the Lydian, and we still use these intervals. And these intervals are based on the major scale. So I would say something like, if I go 2 notes up, I would call that a third, right? They're going to call that a third going up. I don't want to call it a third because that implies that this is the 1, and they would call it a major third as well, which is also confusing because I want to measure from this area. I don't need to make another scale in order to do that in the first place. And if I did make another scale, it wouldn't be the major scale. It would be a major type scale, which still has a major third in it, but the scale would actually be a Lydian scale. It would have the same notes in it. It's not going to have all the same intervals as the major scale. That's why this system gets really confusing fast, even though you would think that these like little tweaks or errors, in my opinion, are not a big deal. They are a big deal because they're on the foundation floor of what you're building on. It's like, oh, it's only a little error that we put at the bottom of the pyramid for the Egyptian pyramid. It's like, well, yeah, that error is going to be a problem once you start building like off of the thing, right? Because it's on this is the fundamental piece. This is the cornerstone, okay? This is the lodestone. You can't mess up the lodestone, you know? That's what I'm talking about. Anyway, so now we're going to go, so now let's say we're on the Y and we're going YY. So we're going YY, which I would call a 4-4 modal range. And that's going to be a 0 node away from the Y node at 0 modal half steps. So if I'm on the Y, I don't need to make it the 1. Over here, we'd have to. It would be called a 0 node away perfect first, meaning now you've made the Y the 1. But really, you don't need to do that. So if I see that term, I don't need to say that's the one. I'm just going to say, oh, a perfect first from that place just means that I didn't move anywhere from that node. And so I'm going to, but I'd rather call it a 0 node away from that node, the Lydian node, the 4 node, and it's 0 modal half steps. Let's go at the next one, which makes a little bit more sense. That's in the key, so we can see some actual movement happening. It's a YX modal range. So now I'm going from Y to X. So Y to X. So normally, again, they would say that's a 2 node away major second. But I don't want to call it a 2 node away major second because that implies I have to make that the 1. And I don't want to make it the 1. And it would imply that this is a major scale. And it's not a major scale if I'm using the same 7 notes. It's a Lydian scale, which is different than the major scale. So I'd like to just say, let's just measure from there, the place where we're at. The distance is always the same. We're just going around the block. So it's going to be a 2 node away from the Lydian mode, first modal half step, which would be the second scale degree. So it's just like over here, the 2 and the 2 are important. The M isn't important if you know the 2, right? Because it's a 2 node away second scale degree, which would be the first modal half step. The distance is the important point because I can say logically, okay, that distance fits in both the major scale as well as the Lydian scale. It's the distance that fits. The major doesn't fit. The major makes me feel like I'm in the major scale, right? So in other words, if I'm on the Lydian and I go up to 1, 2, lands me on the Mixolydian continent. If I'm on the Lydian and I go up, it takes me 1 modal half step here, which would mean it's the second scale degree if I made that the 1, right? If that's the 1, now this would be the 1 and then the 2. See how it forces me to make that the 1? I don't want to make that the 1. That makes me change my map. Okay, so that's the problem. All right, so then we're going to say, what if I go from a YA modal range? Then we're going to say that could be a 4-6 modal range. So now we're on the Y, going to A. This is where we are in the map quest. I don't need to make it the 1. I don't need a new map quest. I'm just going to be like, yeah, I'm on Y. I'm going from that look. I'm on Zelda. I was on the 1 before, whatever. Now I'm going the Y to the A. I already have that map quest. I already have that Google map. So what's going to be the distance? It's going to be a 4 node away from the Lydian node, second modal half step, which would be the 3rd scale degree. So again, over here, we would normally call that a 4 node away major 3rd, which means it would be the second modal half step forward. The scale degree is making me think it's the 1st, right? But I don't need to. I just need to see that as a distance. This doesn't tell you the node that we are on. We have to identify the node that we are on and then apply this as just simply a distance term. See, so if I'm on the Y and I go up 4 notes, Y up 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, it gets me to the Aeolian node. If I'm on the Lydian note here in our collection of 7 notes and I go up 1, 2 modal half steps, I get to the Aeolian node. If I make this the 1 and I measure from that, it would be 1, 2, 3 scale degrees. That's why the modes get messy, because you're forcing me to make a scale out of that. And then you start to think it's a major scale because it has the same interval for the 3rd as the major scale has distance-wise to get to the 3rd, but it's not the same because you're in the Lydian scale, not the major scale. So it would be better just to measure from that node is the idea. So then we're going to say, okay, what if I go from a YN modal range? Y Lydian to the N modal range, distance-wise. So that would be a YN modal range or a 4-7 modal range. What's the distance? The distance is a 6 node away from the Lydian node, 3rd modal half step, which would be the 4th scale degree. So that would be equivalent then to now notice this is the weird one, because the 6 node away, as we saw, they made the 7 the perfect 5th, and then they dropped it down to the 6. So we get this diminished 5th instead of a minor 5th kind of thing. Also, this is where the Lydian is different than the major. So you can see the major doesn't have this in it because you have the 0.5. The Lydian does. So the Lydian has this funny like very tensiony interval of the 6-note away tritone, which is the one that we'd have to say is an augmented fourth or a diminished fifth, depending on where it lands. And so in this case, it would be the third modal half step up, which would be a fourth of the Lydian scale. So in other words, if I went from the Lydian and I counted up by 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, we land on the Locrian. If I'm on the Lydian and I go up 3, 1, 2, 3, there's the third modal half step to get to the Locrian. If I made that the 1 and I start measuring as from there, scale degrees, 1, 2, 3, 4, it would be the fourth, not the fifth, because that's, again, the different interval for the Lydian. So that's the one that we would see that is weird. I should see it's weird. How? Because the 6 is weird. The fact that there's a 6-note away distance that lands you on a continent is weird. That's not the way it is in the major scale, and we're going to know just tone-wise that that's the tensiony sound. I don't need to know it's a diminished fifth for the tensiony sound. The fifth might help, but I need to know it's a sixth. Anytime you have a 6-note away distance, that's the thing that should trigger that. Oh, you're like, oh, that's the tensiony sound. All right, so then we have a yi distance. So if I'm on the y, we're going from the y not up to this I, y down, because we're always going clockwise. So that's going to be a y. We'll go counterclockwise later, but right now we're going clockwise. Yi modal range would be a 4-1 modal range. And what's the distance between a y and an I? It's always the same. It's a 7-note away from the Lydian. It's a fourth modal half step, which would be the fifth scale degree. So we can see over here, it would be a 7-note away, perfect fifth. It's the 7, though, that should tell you the quality, not so much the perfect. A 7/5 scale degree or 7/4 modal half steps is the thing that should give you the quality. The perfect's not really adding anything if you know the distance, which is what you want to focus on 7 notes away. So if I'm on the Lydian and I go up 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, we get to the Ionian. If I'm on the Lydian here and I go up 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, we get to the Ionian. If I make that the 1, it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the fifth scale degree. But I don't want to make that the 1. Why? Because it's stupid to make it the 1. It's stupid, okay? All right. Now you're getting, there's no need for personal attack. No, there is a need for personal attacks. They did that they're gaslighting me on purpose. All right, what about a YD modal range or a 4-2 modal range? So we're going from the location Y to the Dorian. I'm not going up to the Dorian. I could, or backwards to the Dorian. I'm going forwards clockwise to Dorian. So that's going to be a 9-note away Lydian fifth modal half step, which would be the 6th scale degree. So we would normally call that a 9-note away major 6, which means it would be the 5th modal half step forward. The 9-note away 6th scale degree or 5th modal half step forward is the important thing, not the major. The 9 should tell you that it's in the major, and then that's the thing you want to compare. You don't want to compare the little letter of major versus non-major. You want to compare the distance. The distance. So we're going to say if we're on the Y and we go up 9, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, we get to the Dorian. And if we're on the Lydian here and we go up 5 modal half steps, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we get to the Dorian. If we make the Y the 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it would be the 6th scale degree. All right, let's do the last one. And well, I'll just pull this one over here for now. So now we're going to go an 11-note away Ionian 6th, an 11-note away Ionian, no, that's not right. I'm on a YP modal range, which is a 4-3 modal range. So this is going to be a Y, not backwards to P, not counterclockwise, but clockwise to P. So P is going to be up here. What's the distance? It's an 11-note away Lydian from the Lydian node, 6th modal half step, which would be the 7th scale degree. We would normally call that 11-note away major 7. The major is not helpful if you know the distance. 11-note away 7th scale degree, which would be the 6th modal half step from whatever point that we happen to be measuring from. In this case, that being the Lydian node. So if we're on the Lydian node and I go up 11, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, lands me on the continent of the Phrygian, right? And if I'm on the Lydian node here and I go up 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, lands me on the Phrygian. If I make the Lydian the 1, it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That means it would be the 7th scale degree. All right, let's do the, so notice that all of these are the same for the major, except that weird 6th right here. That's why this is a major mode, because it has a major third in it, a 4-note away third, which is the second modal half step. But it's not exactly the same because it has that weird 4th in it, or third modal half step. All right. So now let's go. Let's say we check this out and look at the ones that are in between now. So if we go to the ones in between, we have a YY plus, which is a 4 to a 4.5 modal range. So that's going to be a 1 note up from the Lydian node 0.5 modal half step, which you would think would be 1.5 scale degree, but they actually call it a second scale degree. So a 1 note away minor second, because it's not in the major. So that means that if I was on the Lydian and I went up 1, lands me in the ocean. If I'm on the Lydian and I go up 0.5, I'm in between Lydian and the Mixolydian. So you would think that I would call that the 1. If I make that the 1, it would be a 1.5 scale degree. But they don't use 1.5 scale degree. They still call it the second scale degree, but then say something like it's a minor or diminished to indicate that it's in between, that it's landing you in the ocean if you're looking at it from the perspective of the major scale. All right, so then we're going to look at this one. This is going to be a YX plus, or a 4.5 modal range. Distance is going to be a 3 note away from the Lydian node 1.5 modal half step, which would be a 2.5 scale degree, but they just rounded up to a third, but say it's a flat third, or in other words, a minor third from the perspective of a major scale. So then we can say, all right, that means that if I'm on the Lydian, and I go up by 4, 1, 2, 3. Wait a sec, I'm on the Lydian. I go up by 3. 1, 2, 3 lands me in the ocean, right? And if I'm on here and I go up 1.5, it's going to land me in between the X and the Y. If I made that the 1 and I went up 1, 2, you would think it would be 2.5 in between here, but no, they call that the third and indicate that it's a step back by the minor notation is the normal notation. All right, let's do the YA plus modal range, which is a 4 to a 4.5 modal range. Distance is going to be 5 modal half steps from the Lydian mode, which is going to be a 2.2. Wait a sec, this should be 2.5. I'm sorry, I should correct that. 2.5 distance, modal half steps. So if I'm on the Y here and I go up 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, lands me in the ocean. If I'm on the Y here and I go up 2, should be 2.5. It'd be 1, 2.5, lands me in between the Aeolian and the Locrian node. All right, let's do the next one. We're going to go down here. We're running long on time. Let's see if we can make this faster. It's a YI plus modal range, or a 4 to a 1.5 modal range. Has a distance of an 8 note away Lydian 4.5 modal half step, which you would think would be a 5.5 scale degree, but no, we rounded up to 6 on the scale degrees, but then indicate that it's flattened, landing you in the ocean from the perspective of the major scale with the minor notation. So then if we're on the Lydian, we go up 8. So Lydian up 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lands me in the ocean between the Ionian and Dorian nodes. If we're on the Lydian here and we go up the 4.5, 1, 2, 3, 4.5 lands me between the Ionian and the Dorian. If we make that the 1 and we go up 5.5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.5, you would think this would be 5.5 scale degree, but again, they call it a sixth, and then say that we're flattening it with the minor. So then if we have this one, it would be a 10 note away Ionian. Wait a second, that's not right. Where am I? I'm in a YD plus modal range, which is a 4.2.5 modal range, which is going to be a 10 note away from the Lydian node, 5.5 modal half steps forward, which you would think would be 6.5 scale degree, but they rounded up to a seventh and indicate that it's flattened from the perspective of the major scale with the minor. So that's going to be then, if I go up from the Y up 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, lands me in the ocean. If I'm on the Y here and I go up 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it would be then landing me, I'm sorry, between 5, it would be between these two. Is that right? I went up 5.5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.5 would be in between here, and it would be 6.5 if I made the Y the 1, but they don't use 6.5. Again, they rounded up to the 7. Okay, let's see if we can get the last major mode here. So we'll do this quickly. This is going to be the fifth, which would be the Mixolydian, the bluesy mode. So this is the one that has everything that's going to be the same as the Ionian distance-wise, except that it has that cool bluesy minor 7 in it that gives it that tone to it. So that's the key. So we've got then an XX modal range, which is going to be a 5-5 modal range right there. We're not moving anywhere. So that's going to be a 0 notes away from the Mixolydian node, and it's going to be 0 modal half steps. That would mean the first scale degree. So we would still call that a 0 note away perfect first, right? Because we would make that X the 1. But once again, I don't need to make that the 1. I'm just going to say I'm measuring from the X, which is the G, and then I just realized that this 0 note away perfect first actually means a 0 note away from whatever note I'm on, the G or the Mixolydian node. And the first means that it's off by 1, means I didn't go anywhere. It stayed on the same spot. All right, so then let's go to the next one that's in the key. That's going to be an XA modal range. So we're going to go one step up from the Mixolydian continent to the Aeolian continent, which is a 5-6 modal range. What's the distance? It's going to be a 2 note away from the Mixolydian node first modal half step, which would be the second scale degree. That's also in the Lydian mode. That's in the Ionian mode, and we would call that a 2 note away major second typically, because it would be the first modal half step up, the second's off by 1. The major's not really telling me anything if I know the distance in notes, which is 2 notes away. So if I'm on the Mixolydian, I go up 2, lands me in the Aeolian continent. If I'm on the Mixolydian and I go 1 note up, then that lands me on Aeolian. That's the first modal half step. If I make that the 1, then that would be 1, 2, second scale degree. But I don't want to make that the 1 because it's stupid. All right, so then we go to this one. It's a YN modal range. It's an XN modal range or a 5-7 modal range. Those are the continents that we're going to. What's the distance? How many miles is it? Well, if we measure it in notes, it's going to be a 4 note away from the Mixolydian node. It's going to be if we measure it in modal half steps, it's going to be 2 modal half steps away, which if we measure it in scale degrees, the stupid way, it would be the third scale degree, a 4 note away major third. Again, it's a 4 note away third. That's the important thing. The 4 note away third will land you on a continent from the Ionian mode. It'll land you on a continent from the Mixolydian mode, and it'll land you on the continent if you do it from the Lydian and Mixolydian mode. So if I'm on the Mixolydian and I go up 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 lands me on the Locrian continent. If I'm on the Mixolydian and I go up 2 modal half steps, up 2 lands me on the Locrian continent. If I make that the 1 or measure it and count it as 1 instead of 0 from it, it would be 1, 2, 3. That would be the third scale degree. All right, going to the next one, we're going to say let's go to an XI modal range. So we're going from the X to the I. We're going clockwise, not counterclockwise. So we're going to say then that's the distance. It's an XI modal range, a 5-1 modal range, And that means, what's the distance? Well, it's a 5 note away from the Mixolydian node, 3rd modal half step, which would be the 4th scale degree. Typically, we call that a 5 note away perfect 4th, but the perfect isn't helping me if I know the distance, 5 notes away. 5 note away, 4th scale degree, or 3rd modal half step. That distance is also in the Ionian. It's also in the Lydian. It's also in the Mixolydian, because 5 notes away is a very common distance and is in most of the, actually, wait a sec, it's not in the Lydian, because that's where the Lydian is crazy. So the Lydian breaks the rules right there. But it's in most, it's in the majors and the minors, and you should realize that not because of the little p, but because of the distance, because of the 5. That's the key. Not the p, that's not the key, it's the distance. All right, let's do an XD modal range, a 5-2 modal range. What's the distance? It's going to be a 7 note away Mixolydian 4th modal half step, which would be the 5th scale degree. So we usually call that a 7 note away perfect 5th. So again, we know that's a very solid interval. Most people know it because of the perfect and the perfect 5th, but that's not the thing. It should be 7/5. The 7/5 scale degree, 7 note away 5th scale degree, which would be the 4th modal half step. That's the thing that should tell you that it is very stable and is in most of the modes again. So it's in the Ionian. 7 note away from the Ionian node is a 4 note away, 4 modal half step away distance. It's in the Lydian and it's in the Mixolydian. So if I'm on the Mixolydian and I go up 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, I get to the Dorian location. If I'm on the Mixolydian and I go up 4 modal half steps, 1, 2, 3, 4, I get onto the Dorian. If I make the Mixolydian the 1 and I say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it would be the 5th scale degree. All right, let's go to the next one. We're going to say we're on an XP modal range, which is a 5-3 modal range. So we're going X, not counterclockwise to P, but clockwise to P. And so we're going to say, what's the distance? It's going to be a 9 note away from the Mixolydian node, 5th modal half step. So that would be the 6th scale degree. So we have a 9 note away major 6th is what we would typically call it, but the major is not the thing you want to focus on. 9 notes away, 6th scale degree, which would be the 5th modal half step from whatever node we're talking about, which in this case is the node of the Mixolydian. That's what you want to convert this to in your mind, so that you don't have to think that you're in a whole nother scale and get all going around in circles, right? So that distance then is going to be in most of the major modes. It's also in the Ionian, and it's in the Lydian, and it's in the Mixolydian. It's not going to be in it's not going to be in all of the non majors, in the minor modes or the Locrian. But you should know that not because of the big M, but because of the distance, 9 and the 6th modal half step, which is the 6th scale degree 5th modal half step. So that means if I go up 9 from Mixolydian, I'm on Mixolydian, I go up 9, we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We get on to the Phrygian. If I'm on the Mixolydian and I go up 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I'm on the Phrygian. If I make the Mixolydian the 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the Phrygian would be the 6th scale degree. All right, let's do the last one here. We're going to say, now here's the weird one for the Mixolydian. We're on a 10 note away. That's the one that works, not the 11 note away. That's the one that makes it bluesy. That's the one that makes it different than the major scale. So it's an XY modal range, which is a 5-4 modal range, which has a distance of a 10 note away from the Mixolydian node, 6th modal half step, which would be the 7th scale degree. So we call that a 10 note away minor 7. Now remember that normally this minor 7 means that it would be like a 0.5. It would be a 6.5 from the perspective of the majors. So this basically means that it would be a 7, but it's been flattened from the perspective of the major, right? But from the perspective of the minor, you would think it would usually indicate that it's in the minor modes, which would be the minor scale, Aeolian mode, and the Dorian, and the Phrygian, which this one typically is, but that's not always the case, as we saw with the minor second. All right, so if we go 10 note up from Mixolydian, we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We get to the Lydian, and so that is good. And if I'm on the Mixolydian here and we go 6 up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, we get to the Lydian. If I make the Mixolydian the 1 and we go 7 up, counting that, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7th scale degree. All right, let's do the ones in the middle now to wrap this up. Wrap it up, would you? Because this is going on way too long, way too, no one's gonna. So it's an XX plus modal range, which is a 5.5 modal range, which would be a 6.6 scale degree. You would think, wait a sec, that's not right. Which would be a 1 note away from the Mixolydian 0.5 modal half steps, which you would think would be 1.5 scale degrees, but it's not, because we call it a 2 scale degree. So that would be a 1 note away minor second. So notice what the minor here is doing. It's saying it would be a normal second from the perspective of the major scale. All of these modes are similar to the major scale, except for the Mixolydian has that one different interval, but then we're going to flatten it. So that's why we're calling it the minor here. Over here, it's more specific because it tells you that from the perspective of the Mixolydian, this will land you in the ocean, right? So if I'm on the Mixolydian and I go up 1, it lands me in the ocean. If I'm on the Mixolydian here and I go up 0.5, it lands me in the ocean. If I make that the 1 and I go up 1.5, which that's the 1, and then 0.5, it lands me in the ocean. All right, so then we're going to say, all right, let's go to this one, which would be an AX plus modal range, or a 6.5 modal range, which has a distance of a 3 note away from the Mixolydian node 1.5 modal half step, which would be a 2.5 scale degree, but we have to round it up to 3. It would be a 3 note away minor third. Why? Because from the perspective of the major, which is what everything is measured off of, you would have a major third, which is 4 notes away, and we flattened it with the minor. Over here, again, it's more specific because it's telling you from the perspective of the Aeolian node, if you go up 3, you land in the ocean. This is always telling you from the perspective of the major scale whether you would land in the ocean or not, which might not be the case, of course, for the other modes. So in any case, we're going to say, okay, if I go up 4 from the Mixolydian here, and we go 1, 2, wait, no, I'm going up 3 from the Mixolydian. 1, 2, 3 lands me in the ocean. And if I'm on the Mixolydian here and I go up 1.5, I would go from here to in between the A and the N. If I made that the 1, it would be 1, 2, 2.5 would land me in between, which they call a minor third. All right, let's go to the next one. So it's an XI plus modal range, which is a 5 to a 1.5 modal range, which has a distance of a 6 note away from the Mixolydian node, which is a 3.5 modal half step, which you would think would be a 4.5 scale degree. This one is a 6 note away diminished fifth, because that's normally the interval, but this is the weird, tritone interval, so I don't want to get into the weeds too much on that. But if I go from the Mixolydian and we go up 6, we're going to say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lands us in the ocean. If we're going to be on the Mixolydian, I go up 3.5, 1, 2, 3, it lands me in between the I and the D, which you would think would be 4.5 from a scale degree standpoint. And so that's that. Let's go to the next one. We're going to say it's going to be an XD plus modal range, which is a 5 to a 2.5 modal range. It's going to be an 8 note away from the Mixolydian 4.5 modal half steps, which would be a 5.5 scale degree, which rounds up to a 6 scale degree, but then they flattened it with the minor from the perspective of the major scale. So if I'm on the Mixolydian, I go up 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lands me in the ocean. If I'm on the Mixolydian and I go up 4.5, 1, 2, 3, 4.5 lands me between the D and the P, which you would think would be a 5.5 scale degree, but they call it a 6, a minor 6, flattening the 6 from the perspective of what would fit in the majors. All right, let's go to the next one, which is going to be the weird one, the one that's different, at least from the major. So it's an XY plus modal range, which is a 4.5 modal range. Now, the 11-note distance would land you on a continent if it was the major scale, but doesn't on the Mixolydian, even though it's a major mode, right? So you have an 11-note away from the Mixolydian mode 6.5. This gives you that indication from the perspective of Mixolydian. It clearly identifies it's going to land you kind of in the ocean, right? And you would think that the 6.5 would be a 7.5 scale degree, right? But they're just going to call it a 7th scale degree. Now notice over here, the 7th scale degree is from the perspective of the major scale, because all of these notations are from the perspective of the major scale. This notation is from the perspective of what fits in the other modes, right? This is a major mode, so you would think it would be similar for most of the distances, but not for all of them. There's always going to be one distance off from the two major modes to the Ionian mode or the major scale, and this is the one that's going to be different. So if I go from the Mixolydian up 11, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, lands me in the ocean. If I go up from the Mixolydian here, 6.5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.5, lands me between the Y and the X, which you would think would be a 7.5 scale degree. But they don't call it a 7.5 scale degree. It's going to be a major 7. And again, the reason it's a major 7 is not because this one isn't off because it's a flat, it's a minor. It's because we're measuring from the perspective of the intervals that will land you on a continent from the perspective of the Mixolydian mode, and all of these intervals are based on whether you will land in a continent or not if you measure from the major scale, the Ionian mode. And then so the 7 is from the perspective of the Ionian mode or major scale. The minor 7 flattens that's how it works. So these naming conventions aren't in alignment or named for the intervals related to the distance that you're on from the mode you're on. They're all comparing to the major scale. So that's going to, and I don't think that's the optimal way to do it, because you'd rather measure by distance. And I can memorize the distances that are in the major scale. That's what you would like to do. And then I can easily compare them to the distances that are not in the major scale. I don't need this major and minor thing to give me that indication, or the scale degrees to really help me with that. I should just measure it by basically the distance. That would be I think, actually easier way to do it if we did that from scratch. But that's the idea. So next time we'll go into the minor modes, which will have more differences than the major modes, right? The minor modes will be distinct from these more. And what we'll do first, hopefully if I remember, is talk about the Aeolian mode first, because that's the minor scale, the second most popular scale, measuring from this point. And then we can compare the other 2 points of measurement from the Dorian and the Phrygian, which will only have one interval difference than the Aeolian mode. That's how you want to, once you start comparing these, which we'll do later in more detail, you want to then think, okay, I want to know the differences in the distances, because that's going to give you different flavors from the Ionian, the major modes, which would be the 1, 4, 5, the Ionian, the Lydian, and the Mixolydian. The Lydian and Mixolydian only having one interval each that is different than the Ionian. And then we learn all of the intervals for the Aeolian, which is almost like where you just take all the majors and make them minor, but that doesn't work perfect because it doesn't work for here. So we'll get into that later. But then you can compare the other 2 minors to the minor mode, the Dorian and the Phrygian. So they still have a minor flavor because they have a minor third, but they're not totally the same. The Dorian doesn't feel, and the Phrygian doesn't feel exactly like the Aeolian or the minor scale. All right, we'll talk about that later.